those first few days, we went along to the Arun Valley, which is a beautiful valley, lots of big, wide suspension bridges that we'd cycle across. There were a myriad. So you get from these really good bridges that you could cycle across. They'd have a massive big dip in the middle, big uphill at the other end across the rivers. And then we had to then go, I think, about 3 sort of very high passes. And our visions of kind of, when we got these mountain bikes, it was like, yeah, it's going to be easy. Then it sort of basically dawned on us that actually what mountain biking was in the Himalayas was not cycling, it was actually carrying.
Welcome to the Seek Travel Ride podcast, where we share the stories and experiences of people who have undertaken amazing adventures by bike. Whether it's crossing state borders, mountain ranges, countries or continents, we want to share that spirit of adventuring on 2 wheels with our listeners. Hello, I'm your host Bella Malloy, and I'm thrilled to announce my guest for today's episode of Seek Travel Ride, James Baile. James is an adventurer with a truly remarkable story to share. Almost 40 years ago, in the mid-1980s, he set off on a bike adventure through the Himalayas. His bike of choice back then was a very early model mountain bike. It was simple, rugged, and while devoid of all the fancy tech that modern mountain bikes come with now, there was no suspension, definitely no disc brakes, it stood up to the challenge, carrying both him and his rucksack over some of the highest mountain passes in the world. Starting in Nepal, James ventured to Everest Base Camp, possibly becoming one of the very first cyclists in the world to have reached Kalat Patar at 5,545 metres. But his journey didn't end there. Travelling through Kathmandu, western Nepal and deep into the Indian Himalayas, James's adventure continued to take him through breathtaking landscapes. The raw challenges of navigating these remote regions on a bike, adding an extra layer of vulnerability to the trip, and once again, it was the incredible overwhelming kindness shown to him by complete strangers that would leave a profound mark on James. Listeners, I have a feeling this episode is going to explore not just the physical elements of this bike adventure, or the impressive landscapes, but also the life lessons James has carried back with him. Lessons about resilience, curiosity, and embracing the unknown and uncertainty. James Baile, welcome to the show.
Hi, Bella.
Super pumped to speak with you finally, James. We've been going back and forth trying to figure out when I could get you into my schedule, it feels, for months. So I'm happy that you're sat virtually across from me now. And James, I have so many questions for you, but the question that I start my show with, and I ask it of all my guests, is, do you remember the very first bike you ever rode?
Yeah, I do. I've kind of been a fan of Seek Travel Ride for a while now, so I've heard this question quite a few times, so I was kind of ready for it. What I was trying to work out was, when you say first bike, do you mean the first bike that I rode? Do you mean the first bike that I properly owned? Or do you mean the first bike that I really loved? Or do you mean the first bike that I was envious of? So I can talk about all 4 of those things if you want.
I'm never sick of talking about bikes, James. I'm almost curious enough to hear about all of them. But I want to know the first bike because I want it to be your first bike memory.
So my first bike memory, I can tell you, is when I was about 4 or maybe 5. I think I said this when I did the short, but I was 4 or 5, and I can remember clearly we were not far from where I'm speaking to you now, in Northamptonshire, so in a lovely village, and there's a green. And I can't remember why or how, but I was just basically presented with this bike, and it had no stabilizers on it, and it was the first time ever that I'd ridden a bike with no stabilizers. And I think someone gave me a push, and then my little legs went and they went and they went, and I was like, yes, this is me riding a bike. And there was just that sudden feeling of complete and utter sort of joy at the fact that I was suddenly independent at the age of 4. And yeah, it's just that thing. And then I think someone else was talking about it in one of your podcasts, but there was that thing of then kind of like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. How do I stop? And I ended up ploughing into a bank at the sort of probably a couple of 100 meters. But that was my very first sort of 200 meters on a bike on my own. And I don't think I've ever looked back from there. And I've always, it's just that thing of just the freedom that the bike gave me. And I still love my bike to this day.
I love hearing that story, James. And it's interesting, if I was to ask people to give me a word to describe their first bike memory, there would be, I think the highest percentage of people would probably use the word freedom to describe it.
Yeah, absolutely freedom all the way.
I've had a few guests like you. I'm sorry that you crashed into a wall from your first ride, but you obviously picked yourself up and dusted yourself off and have embraced the freedom that riding a bike can give you. Something else that I've especially loved guests saying is it was a way that they could expand their own little radius from where they lived.
Yeah.
And often people, for example, who grew up in the countryside, it was the tool for them to be able to get out and about and explore. And I've had a few guests say that the first adventures they had was when they were young because they were just exploring new roads.
Yep.
Was that the case for you? Did you ride your bike a lot growing up?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. After that, kind of, we moved further away in Northamptonshire. But my second bike that I really remember was a bike my mother bought me. So it was a green bike. I think I was rather disappointed at the time that it didn't have a derailleur and stuff like that. It had a hub gears and I think it was a 3-speed Sturmey Archer, and it was probably a bit heavy and stuff like that. But I think it did have a proper crossbar on it, so it felt very kind of like a boy's bike. Kind of, I must have been like 9 or something like that. And I got it for my birthday, and then we explored all over. And I can remember, days when we just go off in probably the early 1970s, and we go down the country lanes of Northamptonshire, and we would just go for miles and miles and get completely lost. My mother hadn't got a clue where we were. So I don't know how we managed to find our way back, but we always managed to find our way back. That we didn't have maps or phones or anything else like that, but we just go on these big long trips and without a clue as to where we were going, and somehow we find our way back. But it was great. Yeah, it definitely set me up.
Obviously not geographically challenged, but I'm definitely one of those classic people that if I don't have to think about it, I purely arrive at a place and I've got no clue how to get back. You obviously, from a young age, just had that inner instinct, not geographically challenged like some of us might be.
Yeah, I've definitely been lucky in that respect because it's a strange thing, isn't it? Whether we have something magnetic in our heads, I don't know what it is, but there's definitely something there that means that I have a knowledge of where I am and an understanding of which way to go. Occasionally it fails me, like when I went running in Ireland one time when I got lost, completely lost, and I ended up having to run about 22 miles.
Oh, that sounds painful.
Yeah, about 4 hours later, completely exhausted. But it occasionally lets me down, but most of the time it's there.
Okay, there's riding bikes as a kid and exploring local lanes, but what about the outdoors in general? Were you someone growing up where you yearned to be outside? Was big landscapes and stuff that you sought out, or being in the wild stuff that you sought out? Was that something that you felt close to from a child and now into adulthood?
Yeah, I think so. I think I went through phases, I think I would say, rather than it being constant throughout my whole childhood. But I think I was lucky enough in that I had a friend who lived nearby me, and we'd go and do lots and lots of outdoor stuff. At the time, his parents were basically they had a business where they took Land Rovers and they converted the Land Rovers to then go and then take them across into the Sahara, so down to Morocco and then into Sahara. So me and, oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember. I'll remember in a minute. So it's my old brain now trying to remember names. But basically we went and we'd go and camp out in fields and in hay lofts and stuff like that. We were probably about sort of 12 or something like that. So I did quite a bit. And I think that sort of that exposure to that, what they were doing and things like that really opened my eyes up, I think, to travel. I think also somewhere, I don't know at what time it was, I always had a dream of riding a bicycle to Timbuktu. It's not something I've ever done, but somewhere along the line I had this dream. I've got his name now, Jonathan. Whether it came from Jonathan and his family or somewhere else, I don't know. But somewhere it was in there. And and they come back with sand roses and things like that, and just all these exotic things. And it was so we had a great couple of summers just out in the open and things like that. I think, and then you get kind of, I think, sucked into school and things get maybe shut down for a bit. But then I think once I got into my late teens and into my early 20s, by that time I think I was definitely an outside person. I've been so ever since.
I have to ask you, the dream to go to Timbuktu, is that still there?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, but I think I'm not so sure that's an easy one though. I'm definitely going to go down that way at some point, not in the not too distant future. But I don't know the political situation in Mali and how easy it is to get into Timbuktu. I don't know, but I would so love to go there.
I guess that's the thing with bike travel, isn't it? Especially going to places that we don't hear about, is you start learning more and more about some places too, and you have probably overwhelmingly great experiences in the majority of places you go to, but sometimes there is that conflict to work through as well.
Yeah, I think I can probably name maybe 1 or 2 or 3 bad experiences I've had when I've been traveling on my bicycle, but by and large, I think you talked about it, about the kindness and things like that. The people look out for you wherever you go.
That's like the universal language, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely in the bike traveling community, there's probably a high level of curiosity and empathy there. And once you've experienced it yourself, that sort of notion of paying it forward probably comes out stronger. That's certainly a theme for you, isn't it?
Yeah, I think curiosity is a big thing for me. So I think I love, finding out about stuff and things like that, finding out about people. I think everyone has got a story, doesn't matter where you go. And it's kind of, sort of that curiosity to find out about those stories. And because often when you're traveling somewhere, those stories actually tell you about the place and why that place, how that place has come to where it is now in the time that we're currently in, how the past has shaped it and all the stories that people have got. So yeah, definitely it's curiosity is a big thing for me. And it was what interests me about travel, I think, that curiosity.
A question I've asked recently to some guests has been, this is a show about people taking bike adventures. And then if I was to try and condense down what does the word adventure mean, it's great hearing all people's different answers to that. Am I right to think then, James, that curiosity is something that sits central to that idea for you?
Yeah, definitely curiosity is in there. I think for me, when we're talking about curiosity, I think for me, it's important that it's difficult, I think, to be curious about something that you see day in, day out. Or maybe not. I mean, I think you had Alistair on a few weeks ago and stuff like that, and he was talking about micro traveling and things. Maybe that's doing your kind of condensing your curiosity down into bringing it right down into a small level. I think I've always just enjoyed finding out about different languages, different people, different ways of viewing things and stuff like that. Yeah, I think my curiosity is about the different ways that people think about things when you go to different places, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100% makes sense. I think when you're talking about micro adventures and, Alistair there with his project with Local, it is about the idea that often it doesn't come into our senses that there are things that we live quite close to that could actually spark that sense of adventure and curiosity there. It certainly made me take different streets when I'm out on a local walk and stuff recently just to go, oh, I haven't been down here before. When we talk about yourself there, I mean, taking those trips to the Sahara when you're 12 or 13 years old, what a mega experience and what a way to plant that initial seed. Your first bike touring type of adventures, that was in Spain, wasn't it, in the Picos de Europa?
Yeah, that's right. After I left school, I went to uni. I went to uni in Hull, and an old friend of mine, she was in uni in Sheffield, and I can't remember how we got. I think I was in Sheffield, and I got speaking to her flatmate. We were talking about the summer and what we were going to do with our first summer away. At uni, so we're end of our first year, and somehow we got to the thing that we'd get a ferry from Plymouth and then go down to Spain to Santander and take some bikes, and that's what we did. So we spent I think it was about 2.5-3 weeks just touring the Picos Europa. We had hardly any kit with us. I think we stayed mostly in in hostels and things like that, and it was great, just amazing, just going. And probably first time for me cycling in anything. In the UK it's pretty flat. I'm sure I'm going to offend people up north in the UK.
Not everywhere's the Yorkshire Dales.
Yeah, but even the Yorkshire Dales compared to what you get in Spain and France and the bigger mountains there, quite difficult to do a climb that you're going to be climbing on a bike for 2-3 hours. You can't do that in the UK. So that was the first time.
I've thought about that before. Obviously, where I live in the Pyrenees, gosh, I could choose a route where I'm climbing for 2 hours, maybe more, depending on my fitness levels, right? You can have a ride that's got, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 if you really wanted to thrash yourself, meters of elevation in that. But I always think the difference is if I was to do a ride in Yorkshire, I could possibly end up with a similar amount of elevation, but it's just done very differently. It's not, okay, for 2 hours I've got to pick a gear and just pedal slowly. You've got steep and punchy little leg burner of climbs in huge gradients as well. The Picos de Europa, I've not been there before, but I have seen photos. It looks absolutely spectacular.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's kind of, I think it must have been sort of 1984, 1985 when we went, and it was definitely, for me, it was a place where you'd go back in time, and it was just beautiful, and it felt unchanged in a way that back here it's kind of very different, and it just felt very natural and very undeveloped by humans in the way. And I think we were talking about earlier about the birds and the wildlife and all that sort of stuff. It is just in abundance there, and just amazing. just for me, that was, it was an eye opener. And I think the other thing about the climbing is, in the UK, you do not experience that thing of, right, you've got to the top and now suddenly you've got half an hour of going downhill.
Yes, that's the other side of it, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think on one of our last days, I can't remember what it was. We did some pass, and then we had about 50 miles all the way downhill to Santander, and it was like, yay, just like so good. But you don't get that in the UK.
No, do you know what though? And I will say this: it's something that I've learnt living in the Pyrenees, and it's the prevailing winds there.
Hmm.
Every now and then, I manage to time it correctly, and I guess if I was smarter, I'd do this more often. But just the way that the winds go, typically when I set off in the morning, it's a headwind going up the valley.
Yeah.
But then by the time I've climbed the mountain to turn around to come back, the wind direction changes, and I'm always having a downhill with a headwind.
Yeah.
Very rare you'll have a tailwind on those sections and vice versa. So I hope that your beautiful, glorious descent to Santander wasn't ruined by a cheeky headwind that meant that you had to pedal all those kilometres as well.
Oh no, I don't remember it. I just remember it being that sense of like, whoa, this is it. You've got, you've put the work in and now you've got the payback, and it's definitely good.
There's a psychology when you've got a headwind on a downhill. You sort of feel I shouldn't have to be pedalling here.
You're robbed. You've been robbed.
Yes. Back when I used to ask my question at the end of the show, would you choose a headwind or an endless climb? I think that's why most people choose the climbs as well, because you don't feel robbed by the climb like you do by a headwind.
Yeah.
You feel very much ripped off.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, yeah. No, definitely. Yeah, definitely. And definitely if you get it on the downhill.
The Picos de Europa, do you think that was something that really sparked a seed of seeking out being in the mountains more? Because we're going to get to your trip where you went to the highest, where the highest mountains in the world are located. But I want to understand that, were you a mountain lover before then, or was that what really set you off?
No, I think it was probably my first time I'd had experience of kind of large mountains or larger mountains, I would say, because in Northamptonshire, it's very, a lot of people would say it's flat, but if you're around here, it's very, very flat. Family holidays and stuff like that, we didn't tend to go abroad or anything else like that in those days. So I had been abroad, but I'd never been, we'd been to France and things like that, but I'd never been anywhere like that. So I think it probably was one of those things. I don't think I realized it at the time, but it definitely, I think, opened up that sense of challenge and sort of, the beauty and the just of the natural world that's out there that, and it is out on my, outside my front door here, but it's not. It's a very different world, and so I think it definitely sowed a seed, I would say.
Yeah, and I guess also sowed the seed in the idea for bike travel, because we'll talk about the time that you were travelling then as well. I think things were a bit more simplistic then, and to be fair, they're still simple now. I've had a few guests say the only thing you need is a bike that works, and you can take an adventure, and that's true. You don't need the fanciest gear and equipment. That's definitely for certain. If you want to geek out on that, you certainly can. And obviously now we live in an age where tech helps us so much with planning routes, with, how we store stuff on our bikes and lightweight and all this. But you were very much doing this when things were a lot simpler. You couldn't figure out what GPS computer you're taking on your bike or which mapping software you're going to use for your route. It was a paper map because that's all that was there. And your bikes were very simple. But you did obviously get a zest for slow travel on bicycles from that trip as well, because you continued to do it, and even, it may have been shorter trips, but before you took yourself over to the Himalayas as well.
Yeah, so I think I definitely got a taste for it, but I always felt an affinity. So for that very first story of aged 4, for me, the bike was the thing. The bike was the thing to get out there, and so I don't know what it was. I always had that affinity, and even though I may not have, I think I would say the passion for cycling truly sort of embedded in me, I would say in my early 20s, when I started uni and stuff like that. But yeah, definitely, after that I came back and we did some, I'd go cycling because I was in Hull, so I would go cycling in the North York Moors and stuff like that. So I'd take myself up there just on my own, and I'd go in, I think at the time, I can remember one day going up there in a snowstorm, and I cycled across the Yorkshire Moors pretty much, in not much more clothing than I've got on today. I remember being really cold, but like when I got back, I was like really elated that I'd done this crazy thing. So yeah, I think it was just that thing of, and just really enjoyed just being out on my bike, and just the sense of, I think it comes back to that freedom thing, just out on the road. So I did that, and we did some other things, and then I think what I don't know is, I cannot tell you now how I got to saying I'm going to, at the time I was doing a degree in econometrics, so it's a good degree, and I suddenly decided that I didn't want to do it. I really don't know that. I just know that I did it, and I think maybe it was somewhere my friend Richard that I went with, whether we'd had a conversation somewhere along the line over a drink, I don't know, but somewhere there was something, and so I got to the, after I don't know about 6 months, I came back from uni, and I just told my dad that was it. I was going to go and leave uni and ride my bike across the Himalayas, and he was like, "Whoa," he wasn't happy with that one. Yeah,
I was going to say, how did that go down like a lead balloon? I'm sure.
yeah, he was kind of not as keen on the idea as I was. Let's just say that. But he tried to sort of, I wouldn't say dissuade me, but I think he was trying to I think probably make sure that I was aware at the age of 21 of the the implications of making such a big, seemingly such a big decision to put behind me what I've been working towards, and then go off and do something that was seemingly quite crazy. So yeah, but I really don't know how I got there, but I know I think it was probably in about January 1986. I kind of stopped uni and I made this decision.
Because you moved to London?
Yeah, well, so my dad had a house in London, so I moved back down to London with him. Yeah, it was kind of crazy times. I think in order to Richard and I, it's kind of when you're sort of 21, your plans are probably they are a bit kind of not necessarily well thought out. But basically, I came back down to London and I got a job as a dispatch rider. So in those days, I would say it was quite it was a hard and a lawless place in London on a push bike. We'd cycle around London from, I don't know, about 7 a.m. till 5, 6 at night, delivering parcels. So in those days, no fax machines, no internet. So everything that was printed, it was, I think just at that time they were starting to do digital printing. So before that, everything was laid out in typefaces where people, there were agencies that would basically do the typefaces and things like that. And then you would take the, can't remember what they were called, but you'd take basically these scrolls that had all the typefaces on, and then they would go somewhere else, and then someone else would work out how to print it. And essentially that was what a lot of the dispatch riders in London at the time did. It was good money. It was hard work.
That was what you did to save up for the bigger trip.
Yeah.
I've interviewed a few guests now who've done sort of that bike messenger type of jobs, and I always think they have the best skills, especially in London. You've really got to keep your wits about you, darting through traffic, especially earning a daily bread there on a bike. I imagine it went with the amount of deliveries that you did would determine how you got paid?
Yeah, you got paid by the drop. So basically it was about how much work you did rather than how long. It was definitely a difficult job. I've got no idea how many miles I used to ride a day, but it was a lot of miles a day. So I got very fit very quickly. And I think I had the bike that I took to the Picos Europa. I think that was the bike that I did. And by the time I'd finished, I think it was pretty exhausted, and I think it got stolen.
Oh, no. It always breaks my heart when a bike gets stolen.
Yeah, sadly, it did get stolen. Definitely a sad day. But I think on that day, actually, also, it's one of those weird days that you remember. I remember it because my bike got stolen. But I also remember it, I think, because about an hour or two before that, I actually bumped into Michael Palin, just complete by chance. I think I was delivering a letter somewhere near the BBC in sort of somewhere now Regent Street or somewhere around there, and there he was. And it was like, yeah, Michael Palin. But anyway, yeah. I didn't say hello. I just, he was just there, and I didn't want to go and sort of bounce up to him and say.
He felt your presence.
Yeah, just like,
yeah.
Whoa.
I was going to say something that you definitely need a good skill of, and we talked about it earlier, is navigation, especially as a bike messenger. Do you find that now, having done that, you know the streets of London still to this day from your messenger days, or?
Yeah, they're all in there. I think some of it's changed though. So sometimes if I go, I don't. It's pretty difficult to drive a car now in London, but I do go back on my Brompton, and sometimes I'll be going down, and I'll think, you can just turn right here, and then it's like, it's no longer a one-way street, or it's, there's something. It's all changed.
It is a city that continually evolves.
Yeah, it evolves. But we did. There were a lot of us. We did know all of the street names and stuff like that. We were like encyclopedias of every single nook and cranny in London.
It's like the famous London black cabs. I think, is it the Knowledge?
Yeah.
I wonder if that still is. That's like the infamous test that they need to pass, don't they?
Yeah, I think that's still going. I think we did a smaller area. We were much more concentrated in an area than I think they do in the Knowledge. But I think we'd have probably done better than the black cabbies in London at the time in the area we were in, because we were doing lots and lots of deliveries in that area, whereas they'd be going out in a wider area.
Listeners, are you ready to take your cycling adventures to the next level? Well, at the end of June this year, I'm inviting you to join me in the stunning foothills of the Pyrenees for an unforgettable bikepacking tour. Over 6 nights, that's 5 riding days, we're going to be exploring incredible landscapes, riding through small French villages, and experiencing the rich culture and history of this amazing region. But don't worry, you don't need to carry heavy gear or figure it all out on your own. This is a lightweight bikepacking adventure. Just think purely saddlebags and handlebar rolls. It's perfect for those curious to try bikepacking for the first time or wanting to ride with other like-minded adventurers. You're going to have the support of 2 ride leaders. FYI, one of them's going to be me. You'll be in comfortable hotel stays each and every night, enjoying delicious food all along the way. Spaces are limited because I don't want to dilute your experience as being part of a huge group of people. So don't miss your chance to join our immersive cycling experience. To sign up for this tour, head to seektravelride.com and secure your spot. I cannot wait to ride with you in France. I'm stupendously excited for this tour. Come and join me. Hang on, I'm getting a timeline here. You moved to London and then was it about roughly 6 months or so before you went to the Himalayas?
Yeah, so I came back down to London in January, and then we went, I was looking at my diary the other day, I think I left on the 8th of September. So I probably worked from February through till I think probably late July, maybe beginning of August. Yeah, so sort of 6 or 7 months.
Saving up hard and obviously working, cycling plenty of miles, you didn't need to worry about fitness or anything leading up to it. But did you then, it's not the sort of thing where you can just go online and Google and look at maps, and like you could buy a physical map. I imagine maybe you did, but like even learning about the area, you know, there's Encyclopedia Britannica or atlases or world books. Like, were you going down to the library and finding out information, or?
No, I think we were completely unprepared. We were just like, I would say, underprepared for everything that then happened. I think what I've got here is I've got a map.
Oh, I love it, listeners. It says Pokhara to
Johnson, yeah.
And then Muktanath, Manang.
This is not the map that we took. I don't know. This is one that's I've somehow survived.
Oh my gosh, I love that you've got that.
Yeah,
and
so
it's got holes in it, listeners. It's well used, that one.
Yeah, so this one is kind of, I think we bought in Pokhara, so sort of after we'd been to Everest, but we bought this one. But this is the same map that we had. So when we left, I think I might have bought this map here. So I've got this map here, a decent map of what I would say is a map of the Everest area. And
wow, James, do you ever like unfurl that on a table and look at it?
This one, yeah, this one, yeah. Very occasionally I do. These days, though, you have so much stuff is online and things like that. So I tend to go online. So it's very rare that I'll go and get maps out these days. But I absolutely love maps. So one of the things that Richard and I did do, I think there were 2 real sort of areas of information. One was we used to go down. There's a shop in Longacre in London called Stamford's, which is a map shop, and you can go in there and you can find maps from pretty much anywhere. I don't think they had the maps of this one here. So those ones we got in Nepal. But this one here was bought in Stamford. If you like maps, it's a really, really good shop to go and see in London. But the other thing actually at the time, so roughly around the time, there were these guys.
Bicycles Kilimanjaro.
Yeah.
Richard Crane and Nicholas Crane. Are they brothers?
These 2 are cousins. One of them is Richard, and he's got a brother, Adrian. And what they did was they ran along the Himalayas. So they ran roughly the route that we did. And I can't remember whether, I think what we did was we might have emailed or tracked Richard down.
Surely it wasn't emailing it back.
Yeah, no, it wasn't emailing. We might have written to them, or I don't know how we got in contact with them. We might have, no. So I think how we got in contact with them was what they were doing is they were working for essentially they were doing fundraising for an organisation called Intermediate Technology. There's a book called Small is Beautiful by a guy called E.M. Schumacher, and it's all about sustainable sort of development in countries, basically doing micro things. So I think one of the things on the back of this book here is there's a picture of a windmill. Yeah, that windmill has got a pump underneath it, and that pump is something that is, basically pumps up water and provides this village in Africa where that is developed, provides them with water, but it's a pump they can fix rather than it being something really complicated. And I think at the time that it was quite sort of a different way of thinking about how development happens. And so, yeah, but the long and short of it is we'd seen Richard and his brother Adrian and they'd done this trip. And then so we got in contact with Richard. I think we must have got in contact with them actually through Intermediate Technology, and they put us in contact with Richard. Richard then had a flat not far from where I was living in London, in just near Smithfield. So he was actually a mine of information about going, and he told us loads of things and stuff like that. And then when we got back, we did some talks and things that Richard sort of got us into. Yeah,
It's like passing the knowledge on.
passing the knowledge on. Yeah.
The modern day way that happens now, I mean, there's obviously social media, but through this show, I know for people that are travelling long distances or even short distances around the world, there are WhatsApp groups now that people put their information out there. They ask countries, typically it might be about border crossings or visas or roads to access, or should I take this area, and that sort of that passing of the knowledge down as well. In a small way, I like to think that this podcast does that to people too.
In a big way, I think. In a big way.
Oh, thank you. You're very kind.
No, I think it goes far and wide.
Yeah, it certainly is global. And it is something I didn't think or consider before I started it, was that people tune in while they're on their bike adventures too.
Yeah.
It's made me immensely happy when I get listeners tell me that they listen to the show, and it sparks off the curiosity to give stuff a go. Like, that is awesome. I love that immensely. Yeah. I love that you sort of, like, it's so old school going back to this way. Like, you had to write a letter to an organisation to put you in touch with someone who may have been there. Yeah. You're looking at a paper map. There must have been so much curiosity to get there, but I want to get to the day before you actually flew out, because disaster sort of struck before you both left London, didn't it?
Yeah, so I think it was kind of one of those things where we got no idea how long it was going to take us or anything else like that. We thought probably, 3-4 months, maybe something like that. The long and short of it was that we decided that on our last night we would go out, but we would go out with our, separate friends. So I can't remember where I went. I think I might have had dinner at home. Richard decided that he was going to go out with a couple of friends. They went to a pub nearby, and it's a Young's pub, and it's one of those things where you kind of, why do I remember this? Well, I remember this because what happened was Richard went to the pub. He took his bike that we were going to take to Heathrow the following morning on a Sunday morning and fly to New Delhi, and he took the bike, he chained it up to some railings, and basically went in for the drink, and when he came out the bike wasn't there, so it was just a chain. So yeah, it was kind of like, no.
There's 2 stolen bikes in this episode already.
Yeah. But I think the next morning he came round to my house, and it was like, James, my bike's gone. And it was like, we were like, oh my God, what are we going to do? The long and short of it was that I had quite a lot of dispatch rider friends, one of which was a guy called Michael, who was an Aussie from Melbourne, and he was living in a squat down in Brixton. I can't remember whether, I think we drove in my car down to Brixton from North London Sunday morning, banged on Mike's door and got him out of bed. It was, I don't know, it was probably like 11 o'clock or something like that, and he would probably been out and stuff like that, and he was probably not ready to be woken up, and we just sort of said to him, here's 400 quid, which I think is what a mountain bike costs in those days. And we didn't give him an option of whether it was no or whatever, but he basically parted with his bike, which was a similar bike to mine, for the 400 quid. We had these sort of fairly new mountain bikes that we'd used and we tried out and everything else like that, and they were ready to go, but Mike's bike had been pounding the streets of London for the last 6 months. He wasn't I would say the best at kind of looking after his bike, and the back wheel was loose, and it needed probably some new cone and the bearings and stuff like that. I can't remember, but it was definitely a bike that was in need of some TLC. A well-worn bike.
Were you able to actually give it some maintenance then when you got there? Because this happens on the... Hang on, is this the day?
This is the day we're going, in the morning, and we flew out in the, 9 o'clock at night or something.
How many times have I said on the show that going on a bike adventure is you've signed up for a crash course in problem solving? You're problem solving and you haven't even left yet. I
mean, so we got to Heathrow, we took the bikes to bits and then put them on the planes. I think, in those days you didn't need to put them on. Didn't need to package them up or anything else like that. As long as there were no bits sticking out, they'd take them. So I think we took the derailleurs off.
I wonder if they were treated better then too.
No, I don't think so. I think no, I don't think so. I don't think it was any different in the treatment.
This is a bit of a tangent, but I have read that apparently if you write on the box or you have it in a box that has like a TV box, apparently they get treated a little bit better.
Yeah, okay, I remember that. Yeah, but with these bikes, they just went on the plane and we took off, we took off the derailleurs and anything that was vulnerable.
I remember my husband having a crushing moment where he looked out the window and I said, oh, look, there's our bikes. Yay. That happiness when you're on the plane, you've just arrived in an airport and you're like, yay, they've arrived. Yep. So they were on the plane that we were on. We're on the plane looking at them. And then we just saw the bike bag fall from the very top of the conveyor belt from just fall straight down a few meters to the tarmac.
Oh,
and my
no.
husband's like, well, wonder if that's still going to work. But testament to his amazing packing skills, it did. And actually, I should give a shout out, and I will put a link to it in the show notes, listeners. My husband has done a very comprehensive article and review on how to get your bike all packed up for travel. I never mentioned it on the show, and lots of people have used it. So I will provide a link there because I guess, and whether that's in a bike bag or in a cardboard bike box as well. But back to your story, because actually the flight that you took, I don't know that I guess technically you might be able to take flights here now, but they're certainly not flights that people necessarily do take to get to New Delhi, do they? You definitely took the cheaper, more adventurous route to get there?
Yeah, kind of at the time we were kind of, I mean, basically everything was on a budget, so we
£400 less.
yeah, £400 less, but we thought the best course of action was, when we were booking things up a few weeks before, was to go for the cheap flights. So I think at the time there was flights via Baghdad, which was, I think they were the cheapest one. No, they were 10 quid more. So it was a choice between Baghdad or Kabul. So Baghdad was currently under shelling by the Iranians at the time. So it was the Iran-Iraq war, and then the alternative was to go via Kabul, which was under occupation by the Russians at the time. So we went for the Kabul one because it saved us 10 quid. But yeah, it wasn't until we got out of Heathrow that we realised that actually this was going to kind of be a long flight, because it went from Heathrow to Prague. So we went across the other side of the Iron Curtain in those days into Eastern Europe. And then we switched planes there because I think at the time the planes, the Air Afghan planes, weren't allowed to land in London. So we picked up an Air Afghan plane in Prague, and then from Prague we went to Moscow, and then from Moscow we went somewhere else, and then from there we went to Kabul. And when we got to Kabul, you'd kind of circled up in Kabul is in a big sort of bowl, and you've got these big mountains all around it. And then if you're in a plane, you circle down. And as we were circling down, we had these Russian planes that were dropping chaff out of the back to stop the Mujahideen heat-seeking missiles coming up. And then when you land, it's like you are in a war zone. You're there, and there are bombed out planes, and get into the terminal, and there's no glass in the terminal, and it's kind of, you're thinking, oh, okay, we saved 10 quid. And then and then we got there, and the plane broke down, and then we had to wait for the only other plane. And yeah, but eventually, I think after about 24 hours, we got to Delhi, and and then you get the Delhi experience of kind of like, you go from, I don't know, from sort of Islington in North London to Delhi, where it's like so full on, and it's nothing in the world prepares you for that first time when you get off a plane, I think, and just experience the people and everything else like that you get in Delhi. It was amazing.
I recently interviewed guest Malachi Francis. Hi, Malachi, who's in India. And when I interviewed him, he was in New Delhi in a hostel there. Mm-hmm. And it was lovely just hearing the backdrop of all the chaos of New Delhi in the background.
Yeah, yeah.
Trains rumbling past, constant beepings of the horns. You could sort of hear people. Like, it sort of felt like a proper sensory experience when I chatted to him there as well. I've not been to India, James, but I've heard so much from guests who have. And it seems to be a place that's very, and maybe guests feel this, but it sort of splits people down the middle. People either really love it, or people just don't know how to be there. What was your experience?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love it. I so love the place. It's like one of those things where it's most places, I think, don't get me wrong, it's not that I don't want to go back to them, but I've got other places that I'd like to go and see first. And there's so many of those other places that I'd like to go and see first. But India is definitely on there, because I think even in my trip, it's a big place. There's so many people. It's so diverse. The difference between north and south, east and west is just incredible. Yeah, definitely on my list of places to go back to. I absolutely love the place and people, and just everything about it. So I'm definitely in that. Love the place.
So was it a case when you landed, it was chaotic, but it was just so exciting for you?
Yeah, mate. Oh, yeah. Just really exciting. Really, just a sensory overload in terms of all of the things that are, for us, we got off the plane, and then we booked a taxi into the centre of Delhi, and then when you get dropped off in the centre of Delhi in Connaught Place, and then you just get basically set up on by people, rickshaw drivers and stuff like that, all trying to help you and trying to sort of say they've got a good deal in a hotel, and it's just like they're coming left and right, and it's you don't know which way to go, you don't know who's got the good deal and who hasn't, and it was definitely an experience. that first night of trying to find somewhere. I think we had a rough guide or something like that. I think the place that we thought we were going to go to was booked up by the time we got there at midnight or whatever it was. So we ended up sort of on the streets of Delhi and just had to find a hotel. But we got somewhere, and I think we were pretty exhausted by the time we got there.
There's so many ways I could ask you to tell this story, but I think the best way is to just ask you to just really describe some of the feelings that you had during the first week or two, because I feel you're in somewhere totally foreign, totally new. You're energized and excited and curious about what's going around you. But, almost 40 years later, what are the feelings and memories that stick out so starkly for you?
It's funny. There are some things that I think are difficult in terms of your head where you store things and why things end up where they are. There are definitely some things that are front of mind. So I can remember getting into Kathmandu, and I can remember when we basically got a bus from Delhi up to Kathmandu, but I remember all of that. But getting into Kathmandu and again finding somewhere that was again different to Delhi, but also very, very busy and lots of people. But the architecture was very different, the way of life was very different, everything was very different. There's that sort of thing I remember. I remember, kind of us sort of getting the bikes back together and the first ride on the bikes around Kathmandu. So we didn't ride them in Delhi when we went there. We chose to keep them, in bits and stuff like that, because on the way up they went on the top of the bus. We basically got to Kathmandu and then we put the bikes back together. And coming back to the thing about you were saying about how did we get information, we had a contact, and I don't know how we got this contact, but someone said to us there's a guy called Mike Cheney, and Mike Cheney was the guy that, I'm probably going to say the wrong dates and things like that and get it completely wrong, but he was the guy that arranged Chris Bonington's, I think it was his successful Everest ascent. It may be in 1975 or something like that. But someone had given us Mike Cheney's name, so we went and found Mike Cheney in Kathmandu. So he had a business that was essentially doing trekking and stuff like that, and he gave us all of the information that we needed. So we had to then, we get in those. I don't know what it's like now, but you had to get trekking passes to go up into the Khumbu region. So we had to get all of that sorted out in Kathmandu. So that felt like there was quite a lot of I would say sort of red tape and organising and stuff like that, which is probably these days is probably quite a lot easier.
I don't know. I think Nepal's just recently put in a whole thing that everyone who's in Nepal needs to have a guide for certain things. So yeah, it was a big deal when it first came in. I think it was last year.
We didn't need any of that, but we did need trekking permits, and you had to pay money. You had to pay baksheesh and whatever in different places, and you had to know where to pay it and stuff like that. So we had to find all of that out and things. So once we got through all of that, we then got a bus to the far eastern side of Nepal, and we went to I think it was a place called was it Dankuta, something like that. Anyway, down in the sort of eastern part of Nepal, and we, like I said, we were completely unprepared. We got no idea what we were doing, and these two sort of 20-year-old English men turned up, and we started cycling, and it was like suddenly it was like very hot, it was very steep, and I think in the first day we did about 13 kilometers up this hill, and it's like when we were knackered. Yeah.
You're no longer delivering typographs in London. It's very different, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think also I'd in those sort of 3 or 4 weeks that I'd had off, I think I'd probably gone to the pub too many times and not kept my fitness up and a few things like that. So I don't think I was in a good shape as I was previous month. We got up to this place our first night, and there were all these VSO workers and things like that. And so I think word had got around in the village that there were these two people with bikes, which was kind of a fairly unusual thing, I think, down in the southeastern corner of Nepal in the mountains in those days. So we had, lots of people were interested in us and stuff like that. And the VSO workers were saying, no, you can't do it. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to work. And so there was skepticism from them, and they were probably right in their view. We definitely had some teething issues with Richard's bike in those first few days. Essentially from there, it was very much about getting going. So we did in those first few days, we went along to the Aran Valley, which is a beautiful valley, lots of big, wide suspension bridges that we'd cycle across. There were a myriad, so you get from these really good bridges that you could cycle across. They'd have a massive big dip in the middle, big uphill at the other end across the rivers, and then we had to then go, I think, about 3 sort of very high passes. And our visions of kind of, when we got these mountain bikes, it was like, yeah, it's going to be easy. Then it sort of basically dawned on us that actually what mountain biking was in the Himalayas was not cycling, it was actually carrying.
I can imagine you were shouldering your bike quite a lot on that trip.
Yeah, we had about 2 weeks, I think, until the first 2 weeks was, I don't know whether I've got any photos here, but yeah, we had essentially the first 2 weeks were like just lots of carrying up really steep hills. And then even on the downhills were so steep, they were difficult to cycle down. In the bikes, they're not like modern bikes where you've got, like my son Ben's got he's got a mountain bike and the downhill mountain bike, and you can pretty much go down anything. We're in our bikes, hardtail, no suspension, pull brakes.
How wide were the tyres even?
Not very wide. Not very wide. I don't know, sort of like a couple of inches maybe.
Compared to mountain bike tyres now.
Yeah, yeah.
We're really talking early days of mountain bikes here. Early tech.
Early tech. So the bikes that we took, I think, in the history of mountain biking, I think it started in the US. And in the UK, I think they hit London maybe three or 4 years later. So that was probably in 1983, 1984. So the bikes that we had they weren't cutting edge, but they were new, and it was a new thing, and and people weren't doing mountain biking in those days.
You've still got this bike?
Oh, I still got the frame. Yeah, the frame is upstairs. It's one of those things where one day I don't know whether I'll ever be able to sort of restore it to its former glory, but I'll definitely one day put it back together again. Yeah. I've got one other bike as well. I've got my two favorite bikes that I still have.
I'm curious, and I don't often talk about equipment, but I'm curious what's made the other bike a favorite bike?
So the other bike is connected to this trip.
Tell me about it now.
We have to cast ourselves forward, so away from where we were, and go all the way up into the Himachal Pradesh, so the other end of the Indian Himalayas. And there's a little photo here. This is Richard.
Listeners, I'm seeing Richard there. He's shouldering his bike. It's cyclocross style, very much so.
Yeah, this is on the way up to the Khumbu Glacier and up towards Mount Everest. The other thing here is he's got some cycling shorts on the Soho CC. So there's a cycling club in London, Soho CC. I'll cut to the chase, but we managed to get these shorts from the guy that runs a bike shop in Soho. I think it's still there in Great Pulteney Street in the middle of London. He very kindly gave us these. Sort of probably about 2 months later on, I've sort of crossed the Ganges. I've gone up back into the Himachal Pradesh, and I decided it would be a good idea to go up to where the Dalai Lama lives. And I've got my Soho CC shorts on. And as I get to the top of a fairly big hill, I hear this guy with a German accent go, "I don't believe it." And he was a member of the Soho CC, and his name was Helmut.
You're kidding?
Yeah, yes.
How random.
Yeah, so I spent some time up there with Helmut and his friend Yoshka, and they lived in a squat in West London. Basically, the long and short of it was I stayed friends with them. So when I got back to the UK, Helmut then got me into, I would say, racing bikes. So time trialing and stuff like that. But then he worked in Neil's Yard Bakery in London, and then from there he decided that he was going to start making bikes. And I've got his 7th bike that he ever made, and I raced it and did lots of things with it, and I still got it there. And it's like, yeah, it's all these connections and things that I kind of love. But
is that all 4 of the bikes that you were thinking of with my first question? Like you've got the first bike you ever rode, the blue bike that had the hubs, the bike that you took to Everest, and now this one as well? Or is there another one that I'm missing? Being in Brompton? There's 5 bikes now. Wow.
There was one other one that I think I mentioned, which was when we talked about bikes. There's something else I want to talk about, which is bike envy.
Oh.
Yeah. So when we were kids, I don't know who remembers it, but in the UK we used to have and I think they had them in the US as well. We had these bikes called choppers.
I was going to say, I bet you anything it was a chopper.
Yeah, so we all wanted these choppers, and it's like, and I think lots of people never got a chopper. We all wanted them, but they were probably silly money in those days compared to a normal bike. Yeah, so I never got a chopper, but I always wanted a chopper. But then I did get a chopper, but it was probably when I was in my early 20s when someone left a chopper in my dad's front garden. And we took it to the police, and it never got claimed. So they then gave it back to us. So I ended up with a chopper when I was in my 20s. But yeah.
Do you still have it?
No. I don't know where that one went. I don't know where that
How
one. I don't know.
How much would it be worth now?
Yeah, the big money, because in the UK on Radio 2, there's a guy called Paddy McGuinness, and he's been doing BBC Children in Need. That he's just cycled 300 miles on a chopper from sort of North Wales up to Glasgow.
Wow, Paddy, if you're listening, get him.
Yeah, he's a 6 foot something guy, and yeah, and he's got on a chopper, and I thought, that's easy. And then when I saw him on it, it's like you forget how small choppers are and stuff like that. And
big handlebars.
Yeah, big handlebars. But yeah, that was my bike envy story. So I always wanted a chopper, but I never got one until I didn't want it.
Okay, let's rewind you back. You're in hiker bike territory.
I'm in hiker bike territory, yeah. So essentially, we're calling out things. I think it's quite difficult to call out things in the same way. I think from a story point of view, what I would say in terms of feelings and things like that, I remember it being it was very hard. It felt like we had these rucksacks on, we had bikes to carry. It was, big mountains and stuff like that, and we were definitely not prepared for it. Just getting places to stay at night was challenging because we had no language. There was
No Google Translate.
no Google Translate, no mobile phones, no nothing. So we definitely struggled for those first few days, and I think we got ill and picked up bugs and that sort of stuff. So what I would kind of say is we had to cross about 3 mountain passes, and then eventually you end up in the so we went from the Arun Cozy, which is the river, and then after about 3 passes, we went into the Dud Cozy, which is essentially it's the river that tracks up to the through Namche Bazaar and into the Khumbu and up to the Khumbu Glacier up into Everest. And I think once we got there, then things started getting easier. There were more tourists, and it was just more set up for what we were doing. So in those very early days, we were in places in Nepal that saw very, very few tourists, and it was very much about the odd. We'd come across VSO workers and stuff like that, and they would help us. But it was definitely I would say challenging. I don't know exactly how long it took us, but it took us probably 2.5 weeks maybe to get from where we started up into the up towards Namche Bazaar.
Because challenges of the terrain not aside, notwithstanding you had to shoulder your bikes for so much, there's also the elevation that's involved in being in those places as well. Do you think, like some of your sickness, I'm having the assumption that perhaps you had some bad water or had some, exposure to some type of food that you're not used to, but could some of it have also been altitude sickness at all?
No, I don't think so at that stage. So I think that was later on.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it was more about the water and just not being exposed to the different bugs that from where we come from. So I think we both got sick in those first few days, and I remember one afternoon just lying down. It was the rain was coming down. It was just a miserable afternoon.
Because the weather would be so changeable in that sort of terrain as well. I've watched many YouTube films of people who are hiking around in Everest or the Annapurna Trail or in places in Nepal, and something that strikes me with that amazing terrain that would just make you feel the size of half an ant, I feel, in those big mountains. And on the trails that I'm watching people, there are exactly what you're talking about. As soon as you start coming to the tourist areas, you've got the places where you've got the tea houses and the guest houses and quintessential Nepal. They all seem to have like blue roofs now. I don't know if that was the case then. Even in nowadays, there's still very basic accommodation.
Yeah.
It seems nowadays accommodation might be free for some trekkers now as long as you buy a meal. Mm-hmm. I think that's something that I've noticed a lot. You're not getting hot water in a lot of places. You're not having showers necessarily in a lot of places. But I bet you were happy to seek shelter in those places nonetheless.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. I mean, so when you're talking about memorable things, it's sort of that thing about the kindness of people. We would... I think probably, I don't know whether it was the first or the second night, I think we slept on someone's veranda, but they fed us and they, we might have given them very, very small amount of money. And a lot of what they were sharing with us was all they had. It was, just incredible. And quite a common thing would be, so these are not tea houses or anything else like that. These are just people's houses that would just take us in, put us up and make sure we're okay. And then send us on our way the following day, all for just a few rupees. Yeah. Amazing.
James, I can't do an episode that doesn't talk about food.
Yeah.
Notwithstanding you were sick at times from the water, I'd love you to tell me about some of the food that you had there that you still remember.
So I think if you go sort of where we started off from, the food was very basic, I would say. So for me, it was definitely a good lesson in kind of appreciating what you have, because a lot of the time in those first few weeks, most of the food we'd eat would be boiled rice with a small amount of I would say spiced lentils. So dal bat, but if you go into a restaurant in London or whatever and you ask for dal bat, it'll be rich and
a lot of ghee, a lot of butter,
a lot of ghee and stuff like that. There was none of that. It was very much a lot of rice, which would be their staple, and then a few spices to kind of give it something. It was definitely makes you appreciate what you have. And then further on, we would get, we might get some potatoes. So just the change would be really nice. Just that thing of I think one night we got into a place and there were some boiled potatoes with some salt. That was our supper after having done a grueling day carrying bikes and things like that. But that was a really nice change from what we've been used to. And then as you get into the tourist trail, then the food becomes more
flavoursome.
More geared up to Western. Yeah. But if you want to talk more about food, I mean, I think there's some of the things that when we went further up from Namche Bazaar, you go up into, as you get right up into I would say into the high Himalayas, you go north of Tengboche. So Tengboche is the monastery where most of the climbers will go, and they'll get the blessing from the head monk of the monastery, and then they go further up. So beyond there, there's a few places where you could stay, and they might have 20, 30, 40 people staying overnight, and you might have some climbing expeditions coming through. So the climbing expeditions they'll be carrying a lot of their food, and then the other people that are trekking will be going into these tea houses and stuff like that. But the people in the tea houses will be cooking on, very, very, certainly when we were there, they might have one stove, a pump-up stove with petrol or paraffin or something like that, and they'll cook for 20 or 30 people from that stove, and they'll have a menu of lots of different things, and it's kind of like it's a wonder that they do it, and they come up with some really quite good food. And you might order a starter and a main course, but you won't necessarily get it in that order, and you won't necessarily, if there's two of you, like as it was with me and Richard, we didn't necessarily always get it together. But what would happen is if there was 20 people eating, you'd all start, everyone would be conversing and talking about stories.
Awesome. I love that about these type of places. Adventurers get together and swap tales. That's the best feeling.
Yeah. So when you're talking about those sorts of things, I would say, so we were kind of oddities. We had bikes, and that was not normal up there.
No. And now some people are doing it.
Yeah.
There is the opportunity to do that. You can do the Annapurna Trail. I've interviewed guests who have done it, but I would say you're still not the norm.
I don't know what it's like now, but yeah, definitely we were not the norm then. There were some other guys up there, so we got up there and we thought we were a bit odd, and there were some other guys that had microlights up there, and it was like they were flying microlights.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Like a microlight glider. Wow.
Yeah, but when you talk about all these, about Helmut and the bike and Soho Cycling Club, these guys were from Islington as well, and it was like there was all these people just sort of connecting up. So they lived. One of the guys lived just down the road from where I'd left 2 or 3 months ago, and they.
No way! Like, what are the chances?
Yeah, and I don't know. I've got no idea, but anyway, it's. I think that's what you get in travel, though, is don't you? You get these strange connections and this web of things that kind of happens. But they were up there with microlights and kayaks.
Are you planning your next bike adventure? Are you wondering how on earth you're going to carry all your gear no matter what type of bike you're riding? Well, whether you're riding a road bike, a gravel bike, a full suspension mountain bike, a steel bike, a carbon bike, an aluminium bike, Old Man Mountain have you covered with their ultra-durable racks and mounts. They're designed to work with any bike. These racks make attaching your luggage hassle-free, so you can focus on the adventure ahead and not be worried that your equipment's going to let you down. Whether it's a weekend trip or a round-the-world tour, their products are the perfect solution for bike travellers like you. Here's the best part. By choosing Old Man Mountain, you're not only equipping yourself with reliable gear, but you're also helping support me in this independent podcast out. Head over to oldmanmountain.com/Seek Travel Ride to learn more. Your new adventure is just about to begin. Now let's get back to the episode. With this journey, you know how you said you left, I think, was it the 8th of September?
Yeah.
There's definitely a weather window to be in the high mountains. Did that play out fine to a point? Because from what I know, you do reach base camp, and you're also potentially amongst the first maybe 3 people who did this journey that you're aware of?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, all I know is that someone told me that when we were up there that there was a guy that had done it the year before or something like that. So I don't know what the history is.
Amongst the pioneers, we'll put you there.
Yeah, definitely up in the early days. Yeah, definitely.
Even getting to there at that time, challenges of having to hike a bike notwithstanding, but then to continue your journey on the way that you wanted to take it, you did come across the challenges of the fact that winter was hitting and snow season was coming and closing roads as well, didn't you?
Yeah, so after that we basically, on the way down, so Richard had an accident, so on the way back down he left his diary and he had to go back and get his diary, and it was, I don't know, about a 3 or 4 hour walk, but he went with his bike, and as he was coming back down he got charged by a yak, as you do, and... That
is so random.
Yeah.
I did not see that sentence coming.
But he's up there, and there are yaks, and yaks can get a bit grumpy, and this yak got a bit grumpy, and it charged him, and he ended up having to take evasive action and went off the side of a fairly steep kind of paths, because some of these paths that we were going on, there would be big drops down. But he was okay, but the bike wasn't, was the long and short of it. Basically, he got his bike back to, we got his bike back to Kathmandu, and then we got it fixed there. The frame had been cracked, but someone fixed it. And we went from there. We cycled to Pokhara, which is, I think, probably a couple 100 kilometers. And I think, basically the bike was not up to it. So that's where we said our goodbyes. So I went one way, and he went with lots of other people that we met along the way back down to Delhi. And I carried on my own. So yeah, it was kind of a lonely day, that first day.
Yeah, I was going to say, what was it like to actually have to say goodbye to your travelling companion there unexpectedly, and then to continue on solo?
It was. I think there were two sides to it. I'd say one side, it was, I definitely felt very, very alone as I went. I kind of, definitely very alone and very, very unsure of myself, I would say. But on the other side, I was quite determined, and also I think it was then meant I didn't have to sort of, if I wanted to go further on a day, I could go further. If I wanted to do less, I could make my own decisions, I suppose is what I'm trying to say, rather than having to kind of negotiate with someone else about what we were going to do and stuff like that. So it was liberating on the one side, but it was definitely a very alone feeling on the other side. I mean, I'm definitely an extrovert. I definitely need to be around people. So for me, it was definitely challenging few days. I think those first few days when I left and carried on along the, by this time back on the road. So I was on the road, and I pretty much remained on the road for the rest of the trip, which is so very different from that first bit where we were walking and carrying and only going a few miles every day, to getting to the stage where I could do 150k if I wanted to in a day.
Did you enjoy that change in the trip, like moving away from the impossible terrain and hiking a bike to all of a sudden that feeling of really moving big distances through the landscape?
I think so. Yeah, I think I was ready for the change. I think it was good. It was it was very different in places, but you'd go. I mean, I can remember one day going, because you'd cycle along and you'd have loads of people with you all the time. So as you go out into Uttar Pradesh, there's just so many people, and you'd always have company. So you'd sit down and you'd get a cup of tea, and you'd be somewhere, and you'd probably have 100 or 200 people with you, just curious in you, and that sort of thing. And you'd also get like people inviting you back to their houses, people buying you tea, people just interested in talking to you. You go into a bank, try and change some money, and and I got put up by a family for a weekend, and I got to to go with them, and just meet some younger people and experience the culture and stuff like that. Just such kindness and lots of different things all over the place. So it was, I've forgotten what your question is now.
No, it was more like, did you enjoy the transformation of just moving distances?
Yeah. And there were still some challenging times, but it was definitely a good, really good experience. And as I say, after a while, then I got to the stage where I went up into the Himachal Pradesh and back up into the mountains. So having crossed over the Ganges and the plain, back up into the mountains, and and then it was that was when it started getting snowy, because it was by this time it was into November.
Because I was going to ask on that point, and I guess that sort of takes me back to my original question in terms of terrain and weather and conditions. You left in September, now all of a sudden you're in November, and winter is starting and the roads are starting to close because the snow falls and that's it.
Yeah.
Had you always planned to still be in that area then? And I guess to be fair, a better question would have been, how long was this adventure meant to go for, and what were your timelines? Was this purely I'm going here and I'm riding to base camp? Were you originally then meant to come home, or were you on an open-ended journey where you could choose when you were going to make it come to an end?
It was, to some extent, it was an open-ended journey, but there was definitely a goal. Bringing it back to Richard and Nick Crane and Adrian Crane, when they ran, I probably need to go and find their book, but I think they ran through Nepal and then into India, and I don't know how far they went, but so my goal was always to get to Ladakh, right up in the top northwestern corner of India, where it's very, very remote.
Were you going from Manali?
Yeah.
Because I think Manali to Ladakh is sort of like the typical route, like the infamous one.
I think it is now, but I think in those days it was, you had to go via Srinagar and then from there up and round, so it's a bit further round. But by the time I started getting up there, it was
snowbound.
Yes, getting snowy, and then the second thing was the kind of the political situation. So you had to be, I think, you couldn't go through the Punjab, and I think then getting up into into Srinagar, it wasn't that easy to get there.
How far did you end up getting before you realised getting to Ladakh, it wasn't going to be possible?
So I think I can't remember exactly when it was. When I went up to McLeod Ganj, so McLeod Ganj is where the Dalai Lama lives, and I think there was some sort of draw there. So I went up there and I spent a few days there. But when I was there, I met an American guy called Scott, and he was on a mountain bike as well. I can't remember where he'd come from. I think whether he'd cycled up from Delhi or something like that. But he was there, and I think in the end, basically the two of us agreed that we were going to go from McLeod Ganj and we were going to try and go as far up into Manali and the Kulu Valley, and then ideally from there we would have gone over the Rotang Pass and then up into Ladakh. But it was, by the time we got there, it was all closed with snow and stuff like that. So yeah, sadly, I've never quite got to where I set out to get to.
Do you feel the pang of unfinished business there?
Definitely, yeah.
You've mentioned before, James, how, for example, there's places that you've been to and they were amazing. Oh wow! Listeners, for your benefit, he's showing me a photo in front of the sign saying Manali. It's a snow-covered road everywhere. Wow, I just love the retro look of this. These photos are impressive. I will definitely be sharing them on our social pages, so definitely check it out. But you were saying earlier, James, how you love places and you'd like to go back to places, but there's also places you've never been to. So this is obviously a case where perhaps you'd have to go to places you've been to get to the place you never got to.
Yeah.
Are you curious enough to maybe try and take this trip again?
I don't think I'd do the whole thing. What I do think, actually, I saw the biking Viking.
Yes. Yeah, Marielle.
Yeah, I think she's been up to Mansalu. So I saw that one and I thought, oh, that looks pretty good actually. To go because what it looked to me like, Mansalu is somewhere where you can go and do the sort of the Nepalese trekking experience. But actually, if you go east, you're going to go up to the Khumbu and do Everest. If you go the other way, you're going to go to Annapurna, and where she's gone looks to be a little bit more, a little bit more off the beaten track, which kind of appeals to me. So if I was going to go back and do something like that again, I probably wouldn't take my bike for that, but I'd probably go and do,
walking and hiking,
and hiking it. Yeah. So that definitely appeals to me. But definitely on the bike, I want to go because I think there's now tunnels and things like that that mean you can get up into Ladakh. So it's maybe slightly less challenging, but it's probably more doable. And I think there are other options other than going through Punjab. So I think it's a bit easier from the political situation.
Yeah, Marielle was definitely hiking in around her areas because she had to wait for her Indian visa to get approved. Mm-hmm. She's in India now. In fact, a small little tangent for Marielle, she was excited to arrive to see the Taj Mahal, bought tickets so that she could see it at sunrise, and in her tired state, because Marielle's a legend and does huge kilometres each day, not thinking that they're huge kilometres, but in her tired state, bought tickets for the wrong day.
Oh, no.
So found this out while she was in the queue, so she missed her moment of sunrise on the Taj. But she's having an amazing adventure. Listeners, if you haven't listened to her episode yet, I'll link it in the show notes so you can find it there. I want you to, James, take me to one day of your trip. I know months ago you shared a day for our mini episode. In fact, that's how I came across your story. But I want you to take me and the listeners to one day of this adventure. It can be any day. It could be one day that you had with Richard. It could be a day that you had on your own. Take me and the listeners there.
We're going to go for a different day, which hopefully is what you wanted me to do. But with the day that we're going to go for is the day. It's not the day that I met Helmut with the cycling shorts, but it's around that time. Okay, so I'd cycled across the sort of the top of India and then up into the mountains, and we got to McLeod Ganj, and McLeod Ganj is up on a ridge, and when you go there, there's kind of I'm going to use the wrong terms, but there's essentially a monastery where the Dalai Lama lives, and you go along there. There's lots of prayer wheels and stuff like that, and there's a really strong Tibetan community there, and there are lots of just really happy people, and it was probably a little bit unusual for there to be people with mountain bikes up there. So I stayed there, but I stayed in the same hotel as Helmut and Yoshka. And basically what ended up happening was I can't remember how many days it was, but it might have been 4 or 5 days that I stayed there. But we got to this thing where we would, at 5 o'clock every night, we would give all the kids rides on our bike. And it was kind of, I'm trying to find a photo, but But the long and short of it was, at 5 o'clock every night, we would go outside I think it was called the Green Hotel, and it would be me and Yoshka, and we'd end up with this scrum of kids just jumping on the bike because they all wanted to go and they all wanted to be taken on the bike, and we'd end up with probably two on the back rack. There was no guards or anything else like that, so their feet would be going left and right, and they'd be holding on for dear life at the back, and we'd probably end up with two on the front as well, sitting on the handlebars. I don't know how, so probably be five of us on the bike, and then they want us to go really fast, and we just cycle all around the lanes and stuff like that, and it was just the most amazing kind of experience to feel their happiness and just that thing of the joy of being on a bike and just doing something different. And yeah, so I would just say that was that time, those few days that I had that I was privileged enough to spend with Tibetan people in the home of the Dalai Lama was just truly amazing.
Oh, what a magic experience. I can just picture their faces with just sort of sheer happiness.
Yeah.
And in fact, imagine if I could ask them, do you remember your first bike memory? Maybe they would tell me about one of those trips.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe
sitting on the back rack, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, occasionally it would go wrong and one of them would fall off or something like that, but they'd get back up and they'd be up for another go. And yeah, it was just incredible. Yeah, just a lovely time.
I absolutely love it. I mean, James, you finished this adventure and went back, but to say you finished an adventure 40 years ago and that was it would be a disservice to you, because you've certainly taken adventures since. It stayed with you. But something particularly about this trip has stayed with you, and you said it that it's really changed you and it really formed you into who you are now. You set off on a journey, I guess, looking for maybe a physical challenge or something else, but I guess the transformational change that happened with yourself as a result of taking the journey was a profound one for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's about growing up. I think for me it was you come out of your teenage years and you start off in your early 20s, and life can feel quite confusing and stuff like that. You don't know really which way where you're going, and what I think I came back with was a real sense of actually anything's possible, and it's if you want to set your mind to do something, you can do it if you go about it the right way. And I think coupled with that is that sense of kindness that you find out about from people, and just the number of people that opened their houses to me and shared with me, and very humbling experience. I think one of the things I love about the bicycle is that it's a very humble way of traveling. You're never, when you travel, I think it's important to try, for a lot of us that are lucky enough to come from rich countries and we have a lot of wealth, it's very easy to travel in a way that isn't humble. And I think being on a bike is a thing that you're never going to be in some places
there's always going to be disparity between you. Even if you are on a bike, you're still going to be the richest person in the village a lot of the time.
Yeah, there's always going to be a disparity, and yeah, absolutely. And but what you do have is, I think, is certainly what I've learned, and I learned in the last trip when we went to Georgia in our camper van, is that I think there's sort of dawned on me that everyone in the world has dreams. Everyone dreams about doing things, and everyone dreams about stuff. There's a thing about, I'm one of those people that's lucky enough to make my dreams come true. And I think by traveling on a bike or something, choosing simple ways of travel is a way that you can connect with people, and you share you can share your dreams with them. And I think actually they respond to that. And I think you form bonds with people in a way that I think, it's easier to form bonds maybe.
It's interesting because it's come up a few times with guests. And it's so obvious to me. You stick out like a proverbial sore thumb when you're on a bike tour through places, because you're the stranger that doesn't look like us, who's not from here, who's on a bike loaded with stuff. That's odd. And so you become a magnet for curiosity and conversation as a result of that. But it was a recent guest of mine, Rob McLennan. He was speaking with his big bike adventure that went from London all the way to Cape Town. He was talking about the connections he had with people and the importance of those connections, because whilst a lot of people sometimes are asking you the same questions you've heard from other people, it was the first time they've heard it, but also it meant so much to them. Rob was talking about the idea of he understood the importance of being present with those people and going through the similar questions. And I think he quipped that he still has people messaging him from Nigeria or the like, wanting to know what's he up to, because he's become a big deal. Like, you're this weird person that's turning up in our village. Wow, I want to know about you. And that sort of sense of connection that comes from that as well. I think it's a beautiful moment to take. I can understand how at times that would be really overwhelming, or I think overwhelmingly there would be such a beauty in it as well.
Yeah.
I'm an extrovert saying that, everybody.
No, I definitely. I think. I mean, on our last trip, we've got people that we're still talking to and stuff like that. We're hoping to go back to Turkey. There was someone that when our van was broken down in sort of about a month into our trip, we got this school teacher who helped us, and then he got another teacher, and then the head teacher came. But the long and short of it is we got all the people from this school, and we've been sending them postcards to the school and stuff like that. And what Juliet and I want to do is we want to go back and we're lucky enough to get 2 volunteering days. So we want to travel back to Turkey and to use our volunteering days to go and help with English language and whatever else we can do in the school.
I love that. It's that sense of paying it forward.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like we get so often we get given that relay baton, and it's we need to hand that baton on and share it around.
Because you're mentioning there your trips recently. I know they've been taken up with an awesome classic-looking combi van, but you do have your Brompton dutifully packed away in there, which to me means you're eking out ways to still take little of those micro adventures, aren't you?
Yeah. Maybe that's what I do now. I go in the old van, and then I've got my Bromptons under the bed, and I whip my Bromptons out, and I go and explore wherever I am. Yeah, no, definitely. I've done in Georgia. I've been, in the high mountains in Georgia on paths, gravel paths on my Brompton, and yeah, lots of stuff. I mean, it needs a new back wheel now, but it's served me well.
That's good. It means it's getting good use.
Yeah, it's been well used.
I've never ridden one, but my good friend Kerry, she lives not too far away from me. Hi, Kerry. She has one, and Kerry, I so need to give it a go. She attests that it's the perfect bike to have. If you could only have one bike, she'd have a Brompton, because it means that you can always get around places. It's perfect. It's small enough to pack away for travel. It means that you can take those incidental small trips as well. You can tour with them. I've definitely seen people do that. I'd probably say there's better bikes for touring, but if you had to have one bike to do it all, that's what she would say. I don't know how it would go in the high mountains of the Himalayas. It'd be a bit lighter to carry for the hiker bike sections, wouldn't it?
It would be all right, yeah. You could just strap it up and put it in a bag on your back rather than having to put it over your shoulder. There are people on Facebook though that are going, I'm on some Facebook groups. I am now a Brompton. That you want to be careful about this conversation because we'll go off. But there are people in Facebook going around the world now on Bromptons.
There are, and actually, Brompton listeners, if you're one of those crazy people, get in touch with me. I know there's people who've done ultra cycles on a Brompton and all sorts of stuff. Get in touch with me. I'd like to dig into it. I might have to ride Kerry's bike a little bit just to see what it's like first. James, when you mentioned quickly there how everyone has dreams and goals and stuff to do that, and you're certainly someone who's been fulfilling that. I mentioned how you took this journey through the high mountains of the Himalaya in Nepal and India. You then continued on. You've taken trips through Australia. You've taken trips through Europe. There's possibly other trips I don't know exist that you've taken as well. If I was to cast your mind forward to your future dream, bypassing the volunteering days in Turkey there, if you were scheming a bike adventure, where would you go?
So I've got quite a few actually from going to Turkey. So I've met one of the things. Yeah, I meet quite a lot of other cyclists now, so I definitely look out for them and things like that. I met a lovely French guy in just north of Batumi in Georgia, and he'd cycled I think from Paris, and he was lucky. He has an arrangement where he gets 6 months off and 6 months on. But anyway, he's kind of inspired me to want to go and do some more out that way. I'd love to get into Georgia. I'd really like to get out into Kazakhstan and and beyond the Caspian Sea. That looks like super, amazing. And then going left, sort of coming back at west. When I was on this last trip, I injured my knee, so I've been getting some physiotherapists. And I've got the physiotherapist is someone called Caroline, but we just talk about travels. But she said to me, "Oh, you've got to go to the Gambia." So I think cycling to the Gambia might be another one. So down through Morocco, down the Western Sahara, and then into Mauritania and to the Gambia, I think might be one to do at some stage.
Oh, I love it. I have to keep an eye on your adventures. If people do want to follow you and keep an eye on your adventures, what's the best way that they can do so? And to see the trips in Turkey, Georgia, Kazakhstan, beyond, and the Gambia take place?
I'm on Insta, and I do a bit of blogging. So I am at the moment. I am working full time. I am 60 now, so I'm hoping in the not too distant future to slow down a bit on work and prioritize more adventures and less work. So yeah, I'm hoping maybe in a year's time to make that happen. But yeah, so I do blog, and I'm trying to do more writing and that sort of stuff because I do like writing. Yeah, so Insta and my blog, I'll give you the details later.
Easy. And listeners, I'll provide links to those avenues to keep in touch with James in the show notes. Definitely do it, because James, you've been taking adventures now off the beaten path for 40 years, and just since we got in touch with you, I've really appreciated your way of storytelling. Something that has struck me a few times that's obviously been of importance to you is you took the time to journal about this at the time. And even now with your current trips, you're doing the same. And I love the idea that you've taken time out to write what mattered to you at the time, what you were feeling, what you were thinking at the time as well. So I think knowing when we were getting together for this show, you took the time out to read back through your journals. And I can only imagine the things that you have just remembered because of that. It was like showing me that well-worn, rooted map at the start, like the stories it could tell. You know, we've really just touched on the surface here today of the stories that you could tell me as well. It just fills me with excitement.
I came back from work today and Juliet said, God, you're chirpy. And it's like, I'm energized by the fact that I'm thinking, I'm getting back into that phase of my life, back into reconnecting with what I would say is big adventures rather than, lots of adventures, lots of curiosity and stuff like that. So I feel really excited about it.
Well, as I look to wrap the show up, you listen to the show, so you know the questions that are coming up. The first one's music related.
Yeah.
I can see in the background you've got a poster of John Lennon, you've got a poster of David Bowie there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying either of the songs need to be from either of them, but if you, James Baile, were to pick a song to be the soundtrack of your adventure, what song is it going to be?
So I did think about this. So the first thing that came to my head was Mr. Blue Sky. I thought about that one because the blue sky, it's obviously a nice thing to be when have a nice blue sky over you when you're cycling. But then I thought, hang on a minute, that's not right. That is not right. So then I thought another...
Oh, so that's not your song?
No, that is not my song. So then I thought about another one.
It's your cheeky way of mentioning two songs.
No, I was going to go three. We're going to go three here.
Oh.
So the next one is Jump by Van Halen. So Jump by Van Halen, I remember it.
Jumping.
Yeah. But that one is an Australia one. So I remember that when I was cycling through Australia, and that was in 1987. And that was going up the east coast of Queensland, and so that was there. And I thought about that one, but then no, that's not the one.
Okay.
So the one is, it's "Here Comes the Sun" by the Beatles.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. And the reason for that one is it does relate to cycling, and it's I remember a day when I cycled from the UK to Siena in Italy, and on about day 2. It basically rained. So in these days, I used to cycle. I go very, very light, and I'd do probably about 200 miles a day. But I cycled from Paris, and I was going through Burgundy, and I just remember crossing this big plain, and there was thunder and lightning. There was nowhere for me to go, and I was getting really down and stuff like that. And then I think I probably about 10 miles down the road, the sun started coming out, and I was singing to myself. I was singing "Hello, Darling," and I'm not going to do it now, because I'll do it out of tune and stuff like that. But I was singing on my dun, "Hello, darling."
Here comes the sun.
Yeah, but I was singing that, and it was like that, and then I just remembered that is the song, and that's the song that I always think about. When the weather is not so good, and you just remember that there will be good days, on the road soon.
I love that. Oh, okay. Well, Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles. James Baile, you are there. That is your song on the Seek Travel Ride music playlist. Listeners, you can find it now on Spotify and Apple Music. If you signed up to the music playlist on Spotify when I first started it, that playlist is locked out. I can't add songs to it. So I have recently linked the new playlist on the Spotify account. So make sure you're following that one there. So you get all of these new songs added there. Okay, final 2 questions. James, you're given a choice one day. You can choose to head down one road, and that means you will be forever cycling on that day on an endless, washboard, super bumpy, turned up, corrugated road, or conversely head the other way, but you'll be facing a relentless headwind. Which one are you going to choose?
Well, I think I'm going to go with the corrugated, actually. Most people go the other way into the headwind. But I'm going to go with the corrugated because I have experienced corrugated, and I know how awful it is. But what I do also know is when you go on those corrugated roads, there's always a tiny, tiny little strip down one side of the road that you can find where you can get you get onto it, and you focus on balancing, and you focus on that, just sticking on the smallest of strips that's just, may not be the smoothest, but it's certainly smoother than the other bit in the middle. And you keep down that, and then you sort of get a bit of hope, and then you sort of wobble off, and then you get back on it, and and it's kind of, and you play this game with the road where you're challenging the road to basically to wear you down, and you're trying to overcome the corrugation in the road. But so I'm going to go with that one.
Yeah, because going into a relentless headwind, you feel like you're just getting beaten.
Yeah, there's no let up from it.
Who was it? Al Humphrey said the harder thing would be if you had a corrugated road and it was a tailwind, because you'd feel totally ripped off.
But then the strip down the middle wouldn't work because you'd be blowing off that all the time. So you definitely wouldn't want that. You want a nice calm day.
All right, you're on Team Corrugations.
Yeah, Team Corrugation.
Final question. I love that I've started asking people this because each answer is unique to them. And that is, I want you to finish this sentence for me. The sentence is, the best thing about taking a bike adventure is...
kindness of people.
I love that. And something that's so impactful and powerful for you from that very first trip too, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still, as I say, I'm humbled by the... I always think if someone came from, I don't know, from Georgia or from Turkey and they cycled through my village, I don't think people would treat that person the same way that I get treated when I go. And it just amazes me that people all around the world are so kind. And I think in a lot of the modern sort of Western ways of life, we forget about it, and we forget about the sense of people and stuff like that. We're also focused on pushing things up hills and stuff like that, and we forget about the people around us.
Two things that have struck me there. The first one is it's sort of more like, it feels like there's more solidarity and a sense of community sometimes in these other places than we perhaps have ourselves. And then the other thing is, like, speaking to people who've taken journeys in these places where they've hit with this profound experience of the generosity of sheer strangers. Someone mentioned it many episodes ago now, was they felt like if everyone could just take a bike tour to experience it, then the world would be a better place because of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I would so agree with that. I think you become vulnerable on a bike. Being vulnerable is kind of a thing, isn't it, that allows you to connect with other people. Whereas if you come in with arrogance and superiority, you're never going to be able to connect with people. So you're never going to then be able to bond and truly understand someone.
I think it is that vulnerability that makes you realise that actually it's okay to take a helping hand from a stranger and to allow that kindness to happen as well.
Yeah.
James Baile, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you and having you take us all down a trip down memory lane. I'm so excited about the fact that you reached out to me and also that you took this trip in the first place. Yes, it's maybe 40 years nearly ago. And I think the other thing that's really clear is what you learnt on that first journey has stuck with you, and you definitely caught the bug. It might have been caught first time in the Picos de Europa, but this trip through the Himalayas definitely shaped you. I came across a quote which you wrote to me when we knew that we were recording, which I thought was very apt, and I'd like to read it out. It said, "What I didn't realise was the experience would equip me for the rest of my life. Equip me to overcome obstacles, look forward, be adventurous, and feel the curiosity that still burns hot to this day inside my belly." James, listening to you and hearing the energy with which you recall and share your stories, that quote from you is so very apt, so very true. I know I'm certainly looking forward to seeing where your next adventures take you. Listeners, I'm sure you will be as well. All is which to say, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so, so much for sharing your stories and experiences here on the show for us all at Seek Travel Ride.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been wonderful. It really has. I've loved every minute of it. I've been thinking about things. It's made me, like you said in that quote, it's just made me think forward again. And it's just a wonderful thing to travel and adventure. And the community that you've got going, I think, is so fabulous and stuff like that. I'm truly inspired by it. So definitely it feels just a lovely thing to be part of it. So thank you.
Also, I'm so happy to have you on as a guest. Thank you, James. Listeners, I know I said this during the show, but I'm really energised having just spoken with James. It's so clear how energising these sort of journeys can be for people, and it doesn't matter whether it happened last week, last month, last year, or 40 years ago. The memories and experiences from taking a bike adventure really stick with people forever. I could tell when I was asking James questions there during our recording that an answer would spring back another random memory, and then we'd go down this rabbit hole. And all the time, I could just also see his face light up just talking about it. It is an energizing thing to do. Something that I especially got from James, not just in the recording, but in our interactions prior to this session, back and forth with our email correspondence as well, was that sense of paying it forward. We spoke on the show, and I feel like I speak about it in every episode, just the overwhelming kindness of strangers that faces bike travellers on their journeys. This is something that definitely hit James, and it overwhelmed him at times with just the hospitality he was given. He has felt it his duty, in a way, to make sure to pay it forward to others, to enlighten people about the realities of different countries in the world, the beautiful people that are there, and to share his experiences of what it's actually like to travel to countries which so many people ignorantly believe what they're told about in the media. It is an absolute pleasure to be able to share his story, and I encourage you to seek him out there in the show notes and follow his future adventures as well. Listeners, if you enjoy Seek Travel Ride and you'd like to keep up to date with what's going on in the podcast, make sure you are signed up to our Seek Travel Ride newsletter. I send it out about every month, and in there you will get information about future guests, what some past guests have been up to, and also what's coming up on the show and what's happening in our broader Seek Travel Ride community. To sign up to the newsletter, all you need to do is click the link in the show notes and you will be ready for Seek Travel Ride news from the community hitting your inbox. Until the next episode, I'm Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening. Hey there, adventurers! Are you loving the stories on Seek Travel Ride? If so, you can help the podcast wheels turning, literally. Head to the link in the show notes and buy me a coffee. Every coffee fuels this podcast, supports incredible guest stories, and keeps the adventure alive. So go ahead, click the link in the show notes, grab me a virtual brew, and let's ride on together.